Hi, and welcome to Chapter 5. In Chapter 5, we're going to be talking about how to design your site so that it can be used for whatever mobile device you choose. So if you want to use it on a desktop, that's great, but if you have it on a tablet or a cell phone, we want to make sure that our site will adjust as necessary. Let's get started. The first thing we talk about is responsive design. We want our design to respond to the user as the user uses it. We want our layout to be flexible so that no matter what device they're using, if they're doing it landscape or portrait, a cell phone, a tablet, or a desktop, that the design is going to auto adjust for you. We want our images to automatically rescale, and we really want to be able to use the width of the device to determine how we want to do this. So we want to use what we call media queries to determine what are the properties of the device. Remember, query just means question. We're going to ask the media, the phone, the device, what are you being used on? Are you on a screen? Are you being printed? Are you on a cell phone, or are you on a big desktop? So when we can ask the device, what are you being used on, we can then adjust our page as it sees fit. Couple of things to think about. First off, your content. When you have a desktop, most of the sites we've been doing so far, you can have lots and lots of data, lots of content in there. But with a cell phone, you really just want it short and sweet. You want to have the smallest amount of data in there because you really don't have that much real estate, that much space. In your layout, you want a cell phone to be in a single column where you don't have to do any horizontal scrolling. With a desktop, it's fine. It doesn't even faze you to be able to scroll or move things around. So remember, with the desktop, the real estate you have to use is a lot bigger. Your links need to be easy no matter what, but with a desktop, you can do them with a cursor or a mouse pointer, whereas with a desktop or with a cell phone, they have to be done with a touch interface. You need them to be able to react with that. Keep an eye on your bandwidth. How much data does it take to run your site? So make sure that your images for a mobile device are in such a state that they can be small and don't take up too much bandwidth. Really irritating when you go to a website and they haven't designed it for a mobile device, and that makes it so that the images are huge and they take a large amount of bandwidth. Your coloring is going to be a little different because remember, cell phones are usually outside with outdoor lighting, whereas desktops are usually inside. So you don't need to have those contrasting colors the way that you would with a mobile device. And finally, think about the device itself. Do you have access to being able to dial the phone or messaging or mapping or these kind of things? Whereas with a desktop, you can't really click the button to call somebody because you usually don't have a cell phone built into your desktop. So let's talk about these media queries. What are we going to ask our computer? We're going to ask our computer with an @ rule. So it's got an @ symbol or an ampersand or an A with a circle around it, with our @ media rule, which is going to limit our CSS to specific media. The examples in the screen here, we've got our screen, we have a TV. If you're going to put this on a TV, you might want to print. You might want to say what the device width is going to be. And these are going to be what type of CSS do you need. Now you can choose to import a given CSS file in the case of a projection or a print or something like that, and not worry about those CSS rules if you were just going to the screen. So these are the different media types that we can run for. We can just do all media devices, obviously. We can have it designed for a braille or an embossed. We can say if it was a handheld device, if it's being printed, projected, or on a screen, if it's going to be done for a speech synthesizer, if you want the sound to be if you want it to be a screen reader. And then of course there's the teletype, and then sending it to a very large screen with low resolution, such as a television. So with a television, you might have limited scrolling. You're not going to be able to scroll around your television set if you're going to be watching it there. So if you're going to put this on a large screen on a TV, it's a different type of projection. And then we can talk about what kind of features can I use with my media device? What kind of questions can I ask my media device? I can ask, what is the color? What is the aspect ratio? I can ask about the color. I can ask about the device height or the device width. I can ask about the orientation or the resolution or the monochrome. So these are some different things you can ask the question. As you'll see when we get into the examples, we are going to do them in order of smallest device to largest device. And that's intentional because as we move through our CSS, as we get bigger and bigger devices, we don't want to be applying the larger styles to the smaller devices. We only want them on the larger ones, whereas the smaller styles can be overridden as they go through. Remember that progressive thing. When you list your devices, you can comma separate them. I know I've said commas are bad, but commas are good in certain situations. And then you can have a feature, and then what do you want its value to be? You can use either ands or ors. So you can say media device is a screen and its width is 580 or greater or something like that. So options that you have in that situation. This is our Trusted Friends Daycare website, and after we have renamed all of our files and added in our author and our date, first thing we're going to do is go ahead and add in our style sheets. So in this case, we're going to be adding in our reset and our styles one style sheet, which is going to make our site go from this to this. So up here at the top, we have our home. We've got our menu bar across the top up here. And we have some text and we have a little aside. You can see at this point that no matter how big or small I make my size, it's not going to change. This is what we're changing in this version, is making it so that when it's done on a mobile device or when it is done on a tablet or a desktop, it all looks nice. So now that we have our style sheets, we can come over to our styles one. Our styles one is partially filled out. All of the base styles are already in it. Make sure that you do fill out your author and your date. And then come on down to the bottom where we have our new styles added below. And at this point, we're going to go ahead and add a couple of media only styles for sizing so that we can change depending on what type of device we're using. Remember the comments are going to be a /*//, and we always like to comment our code so that if anybody else sees it, they understand what's going on. So we're going to do mobile styles, and when we make our mobile styles, we're going to make them from 0 pixels to 480 pixels. That's about where your tablets are going to start. So that's a good place to stop your mobile and turn into your tablet. In this case, I'm actually going to copy and paste this because we're going to end up doing 3. I'm going to do a tablet style. And in this case, we're going to do anything greater than 480. So 481 pixels and greater. And then when we get to our desktop, we are going to say 769. So 769 pixels and greater. So we don't have to say 481 to 768. We could, but we don't really have to because the desktop will pick it up. So in this case, we're going to have a min width or a max width and then 2 min widths. So underneath our mobile styles, we're going to do our @ rule, @ media only, and we're going to do screen because we only want this for screen because we're going to do something completely different for printing. And because we can do 2 different things, we are going to do a max width of 480 pixels. Okay. And then we're going to have our open and close brackets, and we're going to come down here to our tablet. Here we are going to do our media only screen, because again, and we are going to do our min width. In this case, we're going to do 481 pixels. And what that's going to do is allow us to get that tablet at 481 or greater. And then because it goes progressively, as you know, it goes down, we can do the same thing and a min width. Width of 480 or for 769. What that's going to do is progressively, as you have a desktop, it'll look here and go, well, it isn't going to fit into this rule because a desktop doesn't have a max width of 480 unless you got it really small. It'll come down to this rule and it'll apply this rule, but then it'll get down to this one and it'll go, oh, wait, my desktop's larger than that, and apply that. And that just allows us to make that choice. When we talk about our viewports, remember we talked about our viewports really quickly when we talked about being able to have a relative to the viewport size. When we talk about a cell phone, we need to set its visual viewport to the maximum amount of the screen so that we don't have to do that horizontal scrolling. In this case, we can say that our viewport is going to have a width equal to the device width. So the device width is going to be the width of our viewport, and our scaling is going to be 1 initially. That doesn't mean that the user can't scroll in and scroll out. It just means that we're going to set those. Our visual viewport versus our layout viewport. When you think about those two words, our layout viewport is going to be the viewport as it's laid out in our regular basic CSS, and the visual is what can you see on the screen. So the widths are always based on the layout viewport, not the visual. So you must set that when you're doing a cell phone. We're now going to add our viewport to our home page. So I'm in my home page here, my TF home page, and I'm going to put this up in my header. So I have my my meta for my character set, and I like to keep my metas together. I don't like to have some metas at the top and some at the bottom. I like to have all the metas together. And we are going to add our viewport. So our name here is going to be viewport, and our content in this case is going to be what is the width of the viewport. And I'm going to say the width is going to be a device width. So whatever the width of the device is, in this case I'm using a comma. I know I said commas are generally bad, but in this case commas fit. And we're going to say our initial scale is going to equal 1. And that's not equal. Yeah, equal. And don't forget to close our meta tag. So make sure that that is definitely closed. And that is going to make it so that when we, again, still not going to change anything over here because we haven't audited it or we haven't changed it, but our viewport for our mobile devices are going to fit nicely. So building our mobile design, when you're thinking about the mobile device, make sure that you put your most important information first, because a lot of times in cell phones, no one's going to be scrolling anything anyway. You want to have everything right up at the top. You want to decrease any clutter, any extra pieces of information, because you don't want that there. There's not enough space anyway. And you really want to give limitations to the choices that the people have. You don't want to have 26 different menu options. You want to kind of break those down and do things to kind of limit it. So what we're going to do is create a mobile pull-down menu. When we have our mobile device, we want to be able to have our sub-menu items be visible only when you click on the main menu items. In this case, we can set classes to submenu, and we can set our CSS to none for that submenu unless you've already hovered or clicked. So as you can see in the example here, and then we're going to go do it in the code to show you what you can do with CSS to make those pull-down menus work correctly. We're now going to be creating a pull-down menu. As you can see here, we've got this menu option here, but it's kind of irritating because we don't want to see all of the classes all at the same time. We want to just see the top level. And when you click on it or hover over it, that's when you want it to come down. So this is called a pull-down menu that we're going to be building here. The first step of our pull-down menu is going to be setting the display of the menu actually to none. So inside of our pull-down menu styles, see I'm inside my pull-down menu styles here, I'm going to be doing an unordered list, and I'm going to be doing my sub-menu. And I'm going to say display, and we're going to go with none. Now, if we look back over at our home page, you can see we have a couple of different options here. This is our nav bar, and inside of our nav bar, we have sub-menus inside. So we have our regular unordered list at main menu, and our list item for home or for classes, parents, and about us. And then inside of classes, we have our sub-menu here. This is what we're hiding. We're not hiding the whole menu. We're just hiding the sub-menu. So as you can see now, they're all gone. Of course, click on them and it doesn't do anything. If the links were there, they would go to links. But in this case, it doesn't go anywhere. So we need to open those back up when you hover over them. So now that we have them as a display none, now we can add, if it's a submenu title, then when you hover it, go ahead and change the display from none to block. At this point, we're going to go ahead and add in the code to allow it when we hover. So we are going to say if it's an anchor tag and it is of class submenu title and you are hovering, we're also going to include the submenu class itself in that. And then we're also going to be including if you're an unordered list and you are a submenu, because we don't want the submenu to hide if you're scrolling over the submenu and the title or just the submenu itself. We want it to kind of hang out there. So we're going to say if you hover in either of those situations. So when we have our mouse over the submenu title and if we have it over just the submenu itself, then we're going to make our display a block. Now, it's only going to occur when we hover, which is why it's important. So as I hover here on items that have a submenu, they'll show the submenu and it'll stay until I get off of it. So as soon as I'm not hovering, it goes away. If I hover over this one, see how the classes went away and the parents opened. And then I'm completely off of it. If I go to About Us, it opens. But if I go to Contact Us, there is no submenu attached to that. So it doesn't do any, it doesn't change anything because it doesn't have to. It doesn't change any block of your either Contact Us or the submenu underneath it because there is none. So that's how we do our submenus opening or closing. We have it as it's none unless you're hovering. Then once you're hovering, then you can click on something and go to a different page. Once you think you've got your site working for the mobile device, make sure you test it with an emulator. There are a couple of online emulators that you can use, and you can put your code and your CSS in there to show it. But the easiest thing I've found is just running it in your browser and then hitting your F12 for your dev tools and selecting the mobile emulator. So we're going to be doing that in code to show you how to do that. If you are using a different IDE, so your development environment, you might have an emulator in your development environment. For VS Code, we aren't using one right now. That doesn't mean there isn't one that exists, but you can't, that's not how we're doing it. So let's go see it in code. At this point, we're going to go ahead and show you the device emulator again, just because it's always good to have that in there. In this case, we're going to hit our F12 and we're going to get this up and we're going to go click our device toolbar. And you can see that it changed it just a little bit. We got that viewport in there the way that we asked, so it doesn't have to scroll over. And again, these menu buttons are in here. Now, in this case, I can click on them as opposed to just hovering over them. Because when you have a finger, the hover isn't the same thing as using a mouse. So when you have your cell phone, being able to click on them is the thing that you want to do. In that case, those are working. So you can change which device you want to use up here. If I wanted to use an iPhone, I could totally use an iPhone. So I could change it to an iPhone X and it's going to show me just how it would look on that device. If we click off of that, that goes there. We can also do our iPad or our Surface Duo. That's in our tablets. And you can see how the tablet would look there. That's an iPad Pro, and then the Surface Duo looks like this. So we can play around with which device we're looking at, and then back, of course, to our main desktop version. Always good when you're writing a website to test against multiple versions. We don't want to show the customer comments if we're on a mobile device, on a cell phone. Because it's not really necessary, and we like to keep mobile devices as simple as possible. So inside of our mobile styles, make sure you're in your mobile styles here, we're going to start setting up some rules, such as if you are a nav bar called horizontal, with a horizontal class, and you are a link inside of there, we are going to make our font size a little bit different. We're going to actually make it 1.5 EM so that you can see those names a little bit better. And while I'm typing this, I'm actually going to come over here and change this over to my mobile device. We want to have these names just a little bit bigger. So we're going to increase the size of those a little bit, and we're going to increase our line height. so that we can do just a little bit more space between those. There. See how they're a little bit bigger and there's space more between them to make it a little easier for your finger. If you've got really small line height between navigation bars, it's going to make it really hard for you to click on them because people have fingers and fingers are not really small. So that's for that. And then for our side, that's this section down here, we're just going to make it go away. So we're going to say if you're in a side, we're just going to make your display equal to none. So in a tablet, we don't have to worry about that. See, that's a little bit cleaner now. It's got a little bit less stuff. All of our regular code is still here. So if I have a desktop, it looks fine. But on my mobile device, I wanted that a little bit smaller. If they wanted to know the about us, they could probably go look at there. And that's okay. It's nice for a mobile device to make it as clean and simple as you can. When you're building for a tablet, tablets are generally wider than they are long, similar to a screen as opposed to a cell phone. But they're usually usually wider than 480. But they're also kind of less than like that 760. So tablets are kind of this middle ground. You can use horizontal menus rather than vertical menus because even though they're larger than a cell phone, you still don't have that much space. So you do want to use some floating and some options to be able to do your pull down menus in a tablet a little different than we do in our cell phone. Let's go see how we're going to adjust that. Now we're going to change our menu bar for our tablet style because with a tablet, we do want to conserve space. So we really want this menu bar here to actually be across the top. So we are going to say for our UL, for our unordered list, that is of class main menu. And we want the direct list items underneath that. So these are the items themselves: home, class, parents, about us, and contact us. We don't want all of them. Remember, if you don't put that greater than sign, you'll get all of the subclasses as well. And we are going to float it left, and we are going to set its width to 20%. 20% because we have 5 of them. So now, when we refresh, you'll see that they're across the top. And they still pop down. But when they come down, you'll notice that it kind of pushes down the rest of the content, and we don't want it to do that. So we're next going to be adding a couple of things. We're going to be adding our position here as relative. And then we're going to add in an entry for the main menu itself. And we're going to be adding, or for the submenus themselves. And we're going to be adding in a position being absolute, changing their size, and adding a box shadow. So first I'm going to do my position for my submenus. Remember, this is my submenus, and I'm going to make them not fixed, excuse me, absolute. And I'm going to tell them that I want their width to be 200%, just because I want them to look a little bit bigger. When I hit refresh here, see how it comes down? And it goes over. So it fills up 200% of the space. So it goes over this way, 200%, and then this is just, it doesn't need one. I'm also going to add in a box shadow because it makes it look better. So we're going to do a box shadow here, and we're going to make it that gray color that we love, our 51, 51, 51. It's a good box shadow size. And then we're going to add our other 3 values for our direction and our blur. And now you can see it added that kind of box shadow down at the bottom and then over to the right-hand side, just to make it look like it's sitting on top of that picture rather than just blowing into it. So this is going to add in our box shadow. When we're writing for a desktop, sometimes we like to set our max width to about 1024, just because there are some people who have monitors that are huge. They're much larger. And you don't really want it to scroll all the way out to there. So we sometimes add a max width to our body. We also like to add that background or color image to fill in the extra space. So it's filling the screen correctly, but it just gives you options. We also do our submenus a little bit differently. And you're going to see when we go through the code how we want our submenu to be visible at all times, but still being floated to the left and doing our articles and our asides a little different. Let's go look at that code. Now, when we work with our desktop, so I have our big screen desktop, we don't mind that being a vertical list. So we're going to change around a couple of things for the desktop just to make it a little bit different. So in this case, we are going to go to the 769 or greater section, and we're going to do our submenus first. So if you're a UL and you are of type submenu, we want to set your background to transparent, because we don't want you to have a background color. We want to make your box shadow none to make sure that we don't have that box shadow in this case. We're going to have our display be block. We're going to do our position is going to be relative to its owner or its parent. So that's going to be there. And we're going to set that width back down to 100%. That's our submenus. For our horizontal bar, we want to make sure we clear them. So we're going to do our nav horizontal. And in that case, the after, remember, if we want to do a clearing, clear both. We want to make sure we don't have any of that collapsing. Our content is going to be nothing. And our display is going to be table, because that's how we do this. And that's going to allow us to have that bar is never going to collapse. Finally, because the submenus aren't hidden, there's no reason really to have a submenu title. So let's see what that looks like first. So if I refresh, you'll see, okay, so we made it fill in the space. Because we're on a desktop, we can definitely have the space. But we don't really need this line, these 3 lines here, because they're always going to be open, because we've got them all open now instead of it just being on a hover. So now that we've done that, we want to actually get rid of classes, parents, and about us. So in this case, we are going to say if you are on the nav bar horizontal and you are an anchor with a type of submenu title, that's why we titled them differently, so they would have a different class. And we're going to say display none for those. And what that's going to do is make that classes, parents, about us go away, and we just have our details. So in this lesson so far, we have, here is our desktop version. Looks fine, looks fine. You start getting down into, now we're in our tablet version because of my width. And you go down and you go down. And then we can go ahead and change that, probably because of my screen size. Doing our mobile device only. So we can check all 3 of those. This would be our tablet. We can check in our tablet, make sure that that works. Notice the comments came back with the tablet, because with the tablet, we're okay with that. With the cell phone, we didn't want those, so those aren't there. And then, of course, with my desktop, those are there, because you got more space with the desktop. So that was our 3 changes that we're going to do, our desktop style, our tablet styles, and our mobile styles. You notice the only sections that we worked in were those 3. Everything else stayed the same. So we didn't have to change our site itself, go over to our home page and type anything in different here, because we were able to handle those changes all in just the CSS. The last thing that we're going to do on the desktop styles is we're going to be doing something with the article and the aside. So this is our article, it's our main stuff here, and this is our aside. And generally with a desktop, I want my aside to be on the aside. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the desktop devices, and then I'm going to add in a few things for my article and my aside. This is my article. Is going to float left. He is going to have a margin on his right hand side that is going to be 5%, just because I like margins. And he's going to have a width of 55%. Now, back in the olden days, before we had CSS like this, you would have to put this type of stuff into a table or add that width as a inline. Now we can do it with CSS, and that helps. And then our aside, we are going to float left as well. And we are going to make its width 40%. Now, you might ask me, where's the extra 5%? It's sitting right in the middle of the margin. So in this case, we have our float left is going to be 40%, and the whole article is going to take up 5% on the right-hand side, and a width of 55, which is going to make it here. So on our right, we have this little margin here that is going to let it just kind of be separated. You'll see, so this is what the desktop looks like. We've got our aside on the aside. But as we go down into the tablet form, because of floating, it'll go ahead and float down. And then on the media, it just won't, or the mobile, it just won't show up at all. Okay, so now we have our 3 versions. So that is our first session on CSS for mobile design. Come back next time for Flexboxes and a couple of other layout tools.